The steam from the pressing machine had become my only companion. 3 months after my daughter Joyce's funeral, I found myself standing behind the counter of Morrison's dry cleaning in suburban Philadelphia, watching wrinkled fabric transform into something crisp and renewed. If only grief worked the same way. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I took the job 2 weeks after the funeral. Everyone said I needed time to heal, to process, to rest. But rest meant thinking, and thinking meant drowning. The monotony of tagging garments, sorting colors, and operating the industrial machines gave my hands purpose when my heart had none. My son Michael thought I was losing my mind. My daughter-in-law Ingrid made it clear she found my decision embarrassing. "Mom, you don't need to work," Michael had said, his voice tight with what I recognized as shame rather than concern. What will people think? But I wasn't doing it for money or approval. I was doing it to survive the mornings. The older gentleman started coming in about 6 weeks after I began. Every Tuesday and Friday, like clockwork, he'd arrive with garments in pristine condition that barely needed cleaning. Expensive suits, mostly. Wool blends that whispered old money and careful living. He was perhaps 70, with silver hair combed back from a lined face that suggested he'd spent decades squinting at things most people preferred not to see. He never said much beyond pleasantries. "Good morning, ma'am. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Even when it rained, he'd find something kind to say about the weather. I appreciated the predictability of him, the gentleness. His name, according to the tag system, was Lawrence Brennan. On this particular Tuesday in late October, the bell above the door chimed at precisely 10:15. Mr. Brennan entered carrying a single garment bag, but something in his demeanor had changed. The easy smile was absent. His eyes, a penetrating blue-gray, fixed on me with an intensity that made my hands pause on the register. "Mrs. Hollister," he said quietly, using my name for the first time. "Is there somewhere we can speak privately?" The back room smelled of chemicals and detergent. Mr. Brennan closed the door carefully behind us, checked that we were alone, then turned to face me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pity mixed with determination, perhaps. Or anger barely contained. "I need to tell you something that's going to be very difficult to hear," he began. "But I believe you're strong enough to handle it, and you deserve to know the truth." My heart began hammering against my ribs. "What truth?" "Your daughter Joyce didn't die the way they claimed she did." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the sorting table. "What are you talking about? She had a heart attack. The medical examiner was too quick to sign off on natural causes for a previously healthy 34-year-old woman." Mr. Brennan's voice was steady, professional. "I'm a retired detective, Mrs. Hollister. 28 years with the Philadelphia Police Department. 15 of those in homicide. I've seen a lot of cases, and I've developed instincts about when something doesn't add up. Why would you—" I couldn't finish the question. Why would a stranger care about my daughter's death? Because I knew Joyce, he said gently. Not well, but we'd met several times at the Riverside Community Center. She volunteered there on weekends, teaching art to underprivileged kids. My granddaughter was in her class. Joyce was vibrant, healthy, full of life. When I heard she died suddenly of a heart condition nobody knew she had, I started asking questions. My throat tightened. Joyce had never mentioned teaching art classes, though it sounded exactly like something she would do. There was so much about her life I hadn't known, so many hours unaccounted for in our weekly phone calls. What kind of questions? I managed to whisper. Mr. Brennan pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket. I started with her apartment building, spoke to neighbors, the super delivery people. 3 different witnesses saw someone entering Joyce's apartment the night she died. A man, mid-30s, well-dressed. He arrived around 8:45 and left approximately 90 minutes later. The timeline matters, Mrs. Hollister, because Joyce's 911 call came at 10:32, and she was dead when paramedics arrived 12 minutes after that. The numbers swirled in my head. Who was he? That's what I'm still working on. But here's what troubles me most. He flipped through his notebook. The official report states Joyce was found in her bedroom, apparently having collapsed while getting ready for bed. But one of the EMTs I spoke to, off the record, said there were 2 wine glasses on her coffee table. Both had been used. Both had been wiped clean. Wiped clean? The words felt foreign in my mouth. Someone cleaned up after themselves, Mrs. Hollister. Someone who didn't want their presence in that apartment to be traceable. I thought of Joyce's funeral. The closed casket because I couldn't bear to see her that way. The rushed service because Michael insisted we needed closure. And Ingrid complained about the cost of keeping the arrangements open-ended. The cremation had been scheduled for the day after tomorrow. "Don't let them cremate her," Mr. Brennan said urgently, reading my thoughts. "Once that happens, any chance of finding out what really occurred dies with her remains. You need to request an independent autopsy, a thorough one by someone who isn't influenced by the initial findings." My hands were shaking. My son already signed the papers. He has power of attorney for the estate matters. He said it's what Joyce would have wanted. Did she specify that in writing? I tried to remember. Everything from those first terrible days existed in a fog. I don't know. I don't think so. Then you have the right as her mother to contest it. But you need to act fast. Tomorrow at the latest. The door to the back room opened suddenly. My manager, Ted, poked his head in. "Everything okay back here, Aretha? You've got customers up front." "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Just discussing a stain removal issue. I'll be right there." Ted withdrew, and Mr. Brennan moved closer, lowering his voice. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you want to trust that the authorities did their job properly. But I've seen too many cases where inconvenient questions get swept aside because it's easier than admitting mistakes were made." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Really?" His expression softened. "Because Joyce reminded my granddaughter that kindness still exists in this world. Because I saw what her death did to that little girl. How she cried for weeks over losing her favorite teacher. And because I've spent my entire career seeking justice for people who can't seek it for themselves. Joyce deserves that much." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "This has my cell number. Call me tonight after you've had time to think. Next week I'll have more information for you. I've been pulling together evidence, phone records, security footage from nearby buildings, financial transactions. There's a pattern emerging, Mrs. Hollister, and it points to someone who knew Joyce well, someone who had access to her apartment and her trust." "Who?" The question came out as barely a breath. "I have a theory, but I need to be certain before I share it. What I can tell you is this. Whoever was in Joyce's apartment that night knew exactly what they were doing. They were careful, methodical. This wasn't random or impulsive. It was planned." The bell above the front door chimed again. Voices drifted back, impatient customers wondering where I'd gone. Mr. Brennan placed the card in my trembling hand. "One more thing," he said as he moved toward the door. "Don't tell anyone about our conversation. Not your son, not his wife, not your friends. If I'm right about what happened, the person responsible is someone in Joyce's inner circle. Someone who might be watching to see if questions start being asked." He left through the back entrance, leaving me standing alone amid the chemical smells and the hum of machines, holding a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I made it through the rest of my shift on autopilot, smiled at customers, processed orders, operated the steam press with hands that had somehow stopped shaking. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying every detail of Joyce's final weeks. The phone calls that had seemed slightly off. Her voice when she mentioned having complicated things to work through. The way she'd canceled our last planned lunch together, claiming she was too busy with work. Work. Joyce had been a pharmaceutical sales representative, a job that required travel and client meetings. She'd been successful, made good money, lived in a nice apartment in the city. But had she been happy? Had she been safe? When my shift ended at 6, I drove home to the small house in Chestnut Hill that my late husband Robert and I had purchased 40 years ago. The place felt cavernous now, every room echoing with absence. Joyce's absence. Robert's absence. The absence of certainty about anything. I made tea I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table, staring at Mr. Brennan's card. His cell number was handwritten on the back in neat, precise script. I thought about Michael's reaction if I told him I was considering an independent autopsy. He'd be furious. Ingrid would call me hysterical, suggest I needed medication or therapy or both. Maybe they were right. Maybe grief had unhinged me, made me vulnerable to conspiracy theories and false hope. But then I thought about those wine glasses. Wiped clean. 2 glasses, which meant Joyce hadn't been alone. Which meant someone had lied, or at the very least withheld information. The cremation was scheduled for Thursday morning, less than 36 hours from now. I picked up my phone and dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. Mr. Brennan answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Hollister, I'm glad you called. Tell me what I need to do," I said. "Tell me how to stop the cremation and get the truth about what happened to my daughter." There was a pause. Then his voice came back steady and sure. "First, you'll need to contact the funeral home and formally object to the cremation as Joyce's next of kin. They'll require written notice. I can help you draft that tonight if you'd like to meet. Second, you'll need to file for an independent autopsy with the medical examiner's office. I have contacts who can expedite that process, but it won't be cheap. I don't care about the cost." "Good, because there's one more thing you should know before we proceed." His tone shifted, became grave. I accessed Joyce's phone records through an old contact at the department. In the 3 weeks before her death, she exchanged over 200 text messages with someone whose number is registered to a prepaid phone. Untraceable. The pattern suggests she was either being threatened or was involved in something she wanted to keep hidden. My chest tightened. What kind of something? That's what we need to find out. But Mrs. Hollister, I want you to understand what you're getting into. If your daughter's death wasn't natural, if someone deliberately harmed her, then pursuing this investigation puts you at risk too. Whoever did this has already gotten away with it. They won't appreciate you reopening the case. I thought of Joyce's smile, the way she used to call me every Sunday morning without fail. The granddaughter I would never have. The future that had been stolen. "When can we meet?" I asked. "There's a diner on Germantown Avenue, Rosie's place. Do you know it?" "Yes. I'll be there at 8 tonight, back booth. And Mrs. Hollister? Come alone. Don't tell anyone where you're going or why." He hung up before I could respond. I sat in the growing darkness of my kitchen, watching shadows lengthen across the walls, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Not hope exactly, but purpose, direction. The crushing weight of grief hadn't lifted, but it had transformed into something sharper, more focused. Someone had taken my daughter from me. Someone had sat in her apartment, shared wine with her, and then walked away while she died. Someone had cleaned up evidence and let the world believe her death was natural. And now that someone was about to discover that a 65-year-old woman working at a dry cleaner's could be far more dangerous than they'd ever imagined, I checked my watch. 2 hours until the meeting. Time enough to gather Joyce's personal effects from the boxes in the spare room, the items Michael had insisted I take from her apartment before it was cleared out. Time enough to look for anything that might explain those mysterious text messages. Time enough to begin asking the questions that should have been asked 3 months ago. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and sighs. But tonight, they sounded different. Tonight, they sounded like secrets waiting to be uncovered. The spare bedroom smelled of lavender and dust. I hadn't touched Joyce's boxes since Michael and Ingrid brought them over, insisting the apartment needed to be cleared immediately for the new tenant. At the time, I'd been too numb to protest. Now, kneeling on the worn carpet, I realized how much I'd let them control. There were only 3 boxes, 3 cardboard containers to represent 34 years of life. The thought made my hands shake as I opened the first one. Clothes, mostly. Joyce's favorite blue cardigan, the one she wore until it pilled, a collection of scarves I'd given her over the years. Nothing that explained mysterious text messages or late-night visitors. I moved to the second box, finding framed photos, a jewelry box with modest pieces, and her laptop. The laptop. My pulse quickened. Michael had mentioned it was password protected, that he'd tried to access it for important documents, but couldn't. At the time, I'd accepted this. Now, I wondered what he'd really been looking for. I set it aside and opened the third box. More personal items. Her day planner, a stack of mail, her wallet. I flipped through the planner first, noting her neat handwriting marking appointments and reminders. Most entries were mundane. Client meeting 2 p.m., dentist 10 a.m., call mom. But then, 3 weeks before her death, the entries changed. They became cryptic. Meet Jay, 7 p.m., usual place. 2 days later, can't keep doing this. A week after that, talk to M about everything. M, Michael? I checked my watch. 7:15. I needed to leave for the diner in 20 minutes, but first I had to know what was in that mail stack. I sorted through quickly. Credit card offers, utility bills, a letter from her bank. The bank letter made me pause. It was a statement for an account I didn't recognize, sent to Joyce's apartment but marked, "Final notice, account closed." The balance before closure, $47,000. Withdrawn in a single transaction 5 days before her death, $47,000. Gone. My daughter made good money, but she wasn't wealthy. She'd complained about student loans, about rent prices. Where had this money come from? And where had it gone? I photographed the statement with my phone, then gathered the laptop, planner, and bank letter. Everything else went back in the boxes. I was heading downstairs when my phone rang. Michael's name lit up the screen. "Mom, where are you?" His tone was sharp, impatient. "Ingrid and I stopped by. Your car's here, but you're not answering the door." My mind raced. I was standing in my own house, and my son was outside right now. But I'd been so focused on the boxes I hadn't heard them arrive. "I'm upstairs," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Resting. I have a headache. We need to talk. Can you let us in?" I glanced at Joyce's items spread across my bed. "Can it wait?" I was about to take something and lie down. A pause. Then Ingrid's voice, having grabbed the phone. "Aretha, this is important. It's about Joyce's cremation. There's been a complication." My heart stopped. "What kind of complication?" "Just let us in. We shouldn't discuss this over the phone." I had no choice. I quickly gathered everything into my bedroom closet, shut the door, and went downstairs. Through the frosted glass, I could see their silhouettes on the porch, standing close together in that unified stance married couples develop. United front. I opened the door. Ingrid swept in first, her expensive perfume filling the entryway. She was dressed for the office in a tailored suit, her blonde hair pulled back severely. Michael followed, looking uncomfortable in his business casual attire. He worked in finance, something with investments that I'd never fully understood. "What's this about?" I asked. Michael exchanged a glance with Ingrid before answering. "The funeral home called. Someone filed an objection to the cremation." My throat went dry. "Who?" They wouldn't say. Just that a formal complaint was lodged with the medical examiner's office, requesting an independent autopsy. His eyes narrowed. "Mom, do you know anything about this?" I'd filed nothing yet, which meant someone else had. But who? Mr. Brennan didn't have the authority unless... "Mrs. Hollister?" Ingrid's voice cut through my thoughts. "You seem nervous. Is there something you'd like to tell us?" I forced myself to meet her gaze. Ingrid had never liked me, though she hid it behind smiles and Sunday dinners. The feeling was mutual. I'd watched her manipulate my son for years, steering him away from family gatherings, controlling their finances, making decisions without consulting him. "I don't know anything about it," I said. It wasn't entirely a lie. I didn't know who'd filed the objection. Well, someone filed it, and now we can't proceed with the cremation until this is resolved. Michael's frustration was evident. "Do you understand what this means? The funeral home is threatening to charge us storage fees. We have to keep paying for... He couldn't finish. But I could. For keeping his sister's body preserved while strangers questioned how she died. Maybe it's for the best," I said quietly. "Maybe we should know for certain what happened." Ingrid's expression hardened. "We do know. The medical examiner was very clear. Joyce had an undiagnosed heart condition. It's tragic, but it's not mysterious. Then an autopsy will confirm that," I countered. "What's the harm?" "The harm," Ingrid said coldly, "is that you're prolonging everyone's grief. Joyce is gone. Nothing will bring her back. We need to move forward." "You need to move forward," I corrected. "Perhaps I need answers." Michael stepped between us. "Mom, please, this isn't helping. We're all upset, but fighting won't—" "I'm not fighting," I said. "I'm asking questions." "When did that become wrong?" "When it prevents closure," Ingrid snapped. "When it turns tragedy into circus. Do you know what people will think?" They'll assume Joyce was involved in something unseemly, that there was foul play. It will tarnish her memory, or it will reveal the truth. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ingrid's face flushed, but before she could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Meeting moved up. Rosie's Diner, now. Someone's asking questions about our conversation. LB. My stomach dropped. Someone knew I'd spoken to Mr. Brennan. Someone was watching. I need you both to leave, I said abruptly. My headache is getting worse. Mom, please, Michael, we can discuss this another time. Ingrid grabbed her purse with barely concealed anger. Fine, but Aretha, you should know that Michael has been named executor of Joyce's estate. Any decisions about her remains, her belongings, her financial matters, they all go through him now. You might want to remember that before you start making waves. They left in a cloud of tension and expensive perfume. I watched from the window as they sat in their car for several minutes, Ingrid's mouth moving rapidly, Michael nodding with his head down, planning their next move, no doubt. I grabbed my coat and Joyce's laptop, leaving through the back door. If they were watching the front, they wouldn't see me slip through the neighbor's yard to where I'd parked my car one street over. A precaution I'd taken without fully understanding why until now. The drive to Rosie's Diner took 12 minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Someone knew about my conversation with Mr. Brennan. But how? Had they been listening at the dry cleaners? Following him? Following me? I checked my rearview mirror constantly, looking for cars that stayed too close, headlights that matched my turns. Nothing obvious. But that didn't mean I was safe. Rosie's Diner was a relic from the 1950s, all chrome and red vinyl. At 8:30 on a Tuesday night, it was nearly empty. Mr. Brennan sat in the back booth as promised, nursing a cup of coffee. His face looked drawn, older than it had that morning. I slid into the seat across from him. Your text said someone's asking questions. He nodded grimly. A man came to the dry cleaners around 6, told your manager Ted he was Joyce's father, that he needed to speak with you urgently about her affairs. Asked when you'd be back. My husband died 8 years ago. I know. Ted apparently told him that too, got suspicious, and asked for ID. The man left without showing any. A chill ran down my spine. What did he look like? I spoke to Ted after I saw the guy leaving. Mid-30s, well-dressed, dark hair, driving a black Audi. Mr. Brennan pulled out his phone, showing me a grainy photo. I followed him to the parking lot and got this. The image showed a man in an expensive suit, his face partially turned away from the camera, but something about his posture, his build, struck a chord of recognition I couldn't quite place. Do you know him? Mr. Brennan asked. I'm not sure. Maybe. There's something familiar. I trailed off, frustrated by my failing memory. Well, he knows you. Or knows someone who told him you were asking about Joyce, which means we need to move faster than I anticipated. He pulled out a folder. I had planned to wait until I had more evidence, but circumstances have changed. This is everything I've gathered so far. Inside the folder were photographs, printed emails, phone records, and financial documents. Mr. Brennan walked me through each piece methodically. Joyce's phone records show repeated contact with this prepaid number, he said, pointing. The calls started about 6 months ago, increased in frequency, then stopped abruptly 2 weeks before her death. But the text messages continued. Whoever she was communicating with switched from calls to texts, probably because texts are easier to hide. Can you trace the prepaid number? I tried. It was purchased with cash at a convenience store in Center City. No security footage, no records. Dead end. He moved to another document. But here's where it gets interesting. Joyce made several large cash deposits over the past year. $15,000 in February, $20,000 in July, $12,000 in September. All cash, all under the reporting threshold. I thought of the $47,000 withdrawn from her account. Where was the money coming from? That's what I need to figure out. But Mrs. Hollister, these deposits suggest Joyce was either being paid for something or was hiding income. And given her legitimate salary from the pharmaceutical company, she didn't need extra money, which raises uncomfortable questions. Like what? like whether she was involved in something illegal, or whether someone was paying her to keep quiet about something. He paused. Or whether she was being blackmailed. The word hit me like a physical blow. Blackmailed? Joyce would never. People do things out of character when they're scared, he said gently. I'm not judging her. I'm trying to understand what led to her death. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photograph of the bank statement I'd found. $47,000 withdrawn 5 days before she died. Does that fit with your findings? His eyes widened. Where did you find this? In her personal effects. My son boxed up her apartment, but I don't think he looked through everything carefully. Or he did look and missed this deliberately. Mr. Brennan's expression was grave. Mrs. Hollister, I need to ask you something. How well do you know your daughter-in-law? The question caught me off guard. Ingrid? Why? Because I've been looking into everyone in Joyce's immediate circle. Friends, colleagues, family. Ingrid's name came up in an interesting context. He pulled out another document. She works for Meek Financial Group, correct? Yes, as a senior accounts manager. Did you know that Joyce's pharmaceutical company does significant business with Meek? They manage the company's pension fund, handle corporate investments. Ingrid would have had access to confidential information about Joyce's employer. My mind reeled. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything yet. I'm following the money, and the money keeps leading back to people Joyce knew. People she trusted. He leaned forward. The objection to the cremation? I didn't file it, but I know who did. A lawyer named Richard Kowalski. He specializes in estate litigation and suspicious death cases. Someone hired him this afternoon, shortly after you and I spoke at the dry cleaners. Who hired him? He won't say, attorney-client privilege. But someone wants that autopsy to happen, and they're willing to pay for it. He paused. The question is whether they're on your side or their own. A waitress appeared, asking if we wanted anything. We both ordered coffee we didn't need, buying time. When she left, I pulled out Joyce's day planner and showed Mr. Brennan the cryptic entries. M could be Michael, I said. She wrote, talk to M about everything a week before she died. Or it could be someone else. Did Joyce have other close contacts whose names start with M? I tried to remember. Joyce's social circle had grown distant from me over the years. She'd mentioned friends, colleagues, but rarely by name. I'd been so wrapped up in my own life, my own routine, that I'd stopped asking questions. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know enough about my own daughter's life. Mr. Brennan reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. Don't blame yourself. People keep secrets for complicated reasons. The fact that you're asking questions now, that you're fighting for the truth, that's what matters. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Michael. Mom, we need to talk about Joyce's laptop. Ingrid says you took it from the boxes. That's estate property. I'll need you to return it tomorrow. I showed Mr. Brennan the message. His jaw tightened. They're moving fast. They know you're looking for something. Can they legally demand it back? If Michael's the executor, possibly, but not immediately. You have time. He glanced around the diner, suddenly wary. We should leave separately. You go first. Take Joyce's laptop to a computer forensics expert I know. He owes me favors. Tell him I sent you. He wrote down an address on a napkin. Don't go home tonight. Do you have somewhere safe you can stay? I have a friend in Lansdale. I can stay with her. Good. Don't tell anyone where you're going. And Mrs. Hollister? His eyes met mine with fierce intensity. Be very careful who you trust. Someone killed your daughter and made it look natural. That takes planning, resources, and nerves of steel. Whoever did this won't hesitate to protect themselves if they feel threatened. I left the diner with Joyce's laptop clutched to my chest like a shield. The parking lot was dark, streetlights casting long shadows between the cars. As I unlocked my vehicle, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. The man from Mr. Brennan's photo stood 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Mrs. Hollister, he said quietly. I think it's time we had a conversation about your daughter. My hand found the car door handle behind me. I don't know you, but I knew Joyce. The man took a step closer, and I saw his face clearly under the parking lot lights. Mid-30s as Mr. Brennan had described, with dark hair and sharp features that suggested intelligence and calculation. My name is Daniel Wright. I'm an investigator with the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations. He pulled out a badge, holding it where I could see. It looked authentic, but I'd never seen a federal badge before. How would I know if it was real? What do you want? My voice came out steadier than I felt. The same thing you want. The truth about what happened to Joyce. He glanced toward the diner, where I could see Mr. Brennan watching through the window. But you're asking the wrong people for help. Lawrence Brennan is a good man, but he's retired. He doesn't have the resources or authority to investigate properly. I do. Then why didn't you investigate when she died? Daniel's expression darkened. Because I didn't know she was dead until 3 days ago. Joyce was a confidential informant in an ongoing investigation. When she stopped responding to my calls, I assumed she'd gotten cold feet. Informants do that sometimes. They panic and disappear. By the time I learned what happened, she was already scheduled for cremation. The world tilted. Joyce was informing on someone? On her employer, Kellner Pharmaceuticals. He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of Joyce sitting across from him in what looked like a coffee shop. She looked nervous but determined. She came to me 6 months ago with evidence that Kellner was falsifying drug trial data. Lives were at risk. She wanted to do the right thing. 6 months. The same time the mysterious phone calls started. The prepaid phone, I whispered. That was you. For her protection and mine. What she was doing was incredibly dangerous. Pharmaceutical fraud at this level involves millions of dollars and powerful people who don't appreciate whistleblowers. He put his phone away. Joyce was supposed to meet me the night she died. She never showed up. When I went to her apartment the next morning, police were already there. By the time I identified myself and got clearance to review the case, the medical examiner had ruled it natural causes. But it wasn't natural. No, Mrs. Hollister, it wasn't. Daniel's jaw tightened. Joyce was murdered because she knew too much. And the people who killed her are very good at covering their tracks. Behind me, I heard a car door open. Mr. Brennan approached, his expression wary. Mrs. Hollister? Is this man bothering you? I'm a federal agent, Daniel said, showing his badge again. Mr. Brennan examined it carefully. Then his face went pale. FDA Office of Criminal Investigations. You're the one who's been stonewalling my information requests. I've been protecting an active investigation, one that you're jeopardizing with your amateur detective work. Daniel's tone was sharp. Do you have any idea what you've done? Asking questions at Joyce's building? Talking to her neighbors? Pulling phone records through unofficial channels? You've alerted everyone involved that someone's looking into her death. Maybe that's good. Mr. Brennan shot back. Maybe they'll get nervous and make mistakes. Or maybe they'll kill again to protect themselves. Daniel turned to me. Mrs. Hollister, I need you to trust me. I need you to stop this independent autopsy and let the federal investigation proceed quietly. We're close to building a case against Kellner, but we need time. How much time? I asked. 6 months, maybe a year. And what happens to my daughter in the meantime? She gets cremated? Her death gets forgotten? Her death becomes part of a larger case that brings down an entire criminal enterprise. Daniel's voice softened. I know that's not the justice you want right now, but it's the justice that will mean something. It's the justice Joyce died for. I looked between these two men, both claiming to want the truth, both asking me to trust them. Mr. Brennan, who'd approached me out of kindness and concern. Daniel Wright, who claimed Joyce had been working for him, risking her life. I need proof, I said. Proof that Joyce was actually working with you. Daniel hesitated, then pulled out his phone again. He scrolled through, then handed it to me. This is from our last conversation, 2 days before she died. I looked at the screen. A text conversation. Joyce, I'm scared. I think someone at work knows. Daniel, stay calm. We're almost ready to move. Just a few more weeks. Joyce, what if I don't have a few more weeks? Daniel, do you feel you're in immediate danger? Joyce, I don't know. Things feel wrong. M has been asking questions. Daniel, who is M? Joyce, I can't say yet. Not until I'm sure. Daniel, Joyce, if you're in danger, I can pull you out right now. Protective custody. Joyce, no. I need to finish this. For all the patients who trusted these drugs. For everyone Kellner lied to. Daniel, you're brave, but bravery without caution gets people killed. Joyce, I'll be careful, I promise. The last message was sent at 6:47 p.m. on the day she died, 4 hours before someone entered her apartment. I handed the phone back with shaking hands. M again. Everyone keeps mentioning M. We never identified who that was, Daniel admitted. Joyce was protective of her sources. She said M was someone close to the situation, but that she needed to verify information before bringing them in. Mr. Brennan crossed his arms. If Joyce was your informant, why didn't you protect her better? Why wasn't someone watching her apartment? Because we didn't know she was in immediate danger. She insisted everything was fine, that she was being careful. I should have pushed harder. The regret in Daniel's voice sounded genuine. I have to live with that failure every day. My phone buzzed. A text from my friend in Lansdale. Aretha, your son just called asking if you were staying with me tonight. I told him I hadn't heard from you. What's going on? Ice flooded my veins. Michael was checking on me, tracking my movements. But how had he known to call her specifically? He's monitoring me, I said, showing both men the text. My own son is watching where I go. Or his wife is, Mr. Brennan said darkly. Ingrid has the resources and the motivation. What motivation? Daniel asked sharply. I explained about Ingrid's connection to Meek Financial, how they managed Kellner's pension funds and investments. Daniel's expression grew increasingly grim. That's not a coincidence, he said. Kellner's CFO is Robert Meek, Ingrid's boss. If Kellner goes down for fraud, Meek Financial will be investigated too. They'd lose their biggest client and possibly face charges for helping launder money. The pieces were connecting in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. Are you saying Ingrid could be involved in Joyce's death? I'm saying she had motive to keep Joyce quiet. And she has access to resources, including professional contacts who could make a death look natural. Mr. Brennan grabbed my arm gently. Mrs. Hollister, you can't go home. If Ingrid suspects you're investigating, you're not safe. I'm not running from my own family. But even as I said it, I felt the fear crawling up my spine. My daughter-in-law, the woman who'd been coming to Sunday dinners for 5 years, who called me Aretha with that particular tone of condescension. Could she have orchestrated murder? Then at least let me arrange protection, Daniel said. I can have agents. No. The word came out firmly. If you bring in federal agents, everyone will know something's happening. You said yourself that the investigation needs to stay quiet. Your safety is more important than... My daughter's justice is more important than my safety. I surprised myself with the steel in my voice. Daniel, if what you're saying is true, if Joyce died trying to expose corruption, then I'm not going to dishonor that by hiding. But I need something from you. What? Access to Joyce's file. Everything she gave you. All the evidence she collected. I need to see what she died for. Daniel exchanged a glance with Mr. Brennan, then nodded slowly. Meet me tomorrow. There's a coffee shop on Market Street, the Daily Grind. 2 p.m. Come alone and make sure you're not followed. I'll be there. He left without another word, disappearing into the darkness beyond the parking lot lights. Mr. Brennan stayed, his face creased with worry. This is bigger than we thought, he said quietly. Federal investigations, pharmaceutical fraud, money laundering. Mrs. Hollister, are you sure you want to keep going? We could step back. Let the FBI handle it. Could we? I met his eyes. Could you walk away knowing Joyce died alone, scared, betrayed by people she trusted? Could you sleep at night knowing her killers might never face justice because federal cases take years and often fail? He was quiet for a long moment. No, I suppose I couldn't. Then we keep going. Together. I drove home despite the warnings, despite the fear. If Michael and Ingrid were watching, let them see I wasn't intimidated. Let them see I was done being the convenient, grieving mother who asked no questions. The house was dark when I arrived. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Then I saw it. A light in my kitchen window. A light I hadn't left on. Someone was inside. I grabbed my phone, fingers hovering over 911. But what would I say? Someone's in my house. Possibly my son or his wife. The police would think I was paranoid. Instead, I texted Mr. Brennan. "Someone's in my house. What do I do?" His response came immediately. "Get out of there. Now. I'm calling police." But I didn't run. Instead, I got out of the car, walked up to my front door, and opened it. Michael sat at my kitchen table, Joyce's laptop open in front of him. "Mom," he said without looking up, "we need to talk about what you've been doing." I closed the door behind me, forcing my voice to stay calm. "How did you get in?" "I still have my key, remember?" He finally looked at me, and his expression was cold, unfamiliar. "You took Joyce's laptop. You've been going through her things. You filed an objection to the cremation." "I didn't file anything." "Don't lie to me." He stood, and I was reminded that my son was 6 feet tall, that he outweighed me by 100 pounds. "Ingrid and I know you've been asking questions, talking to that retired cop, making trouble. I'm looking for the truth about my daughter's death. The truth is, she's dead." His voice cracked. "The truth is nothing you do will bring her back. Why can't you accept that?" "Because I don't believe she died naturally." The words hung between us like a chasm. Michael's face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone killed her. Someone who had access to her apartment, who knew her well enough to earn her trust. Someone who wanted to silence her before she could reveal what she knew about Kellner Pharmaceuticals." Michael's expression froze. "How do you know about Kellner?" The question confirmed everything. He knew. He'd known all along. "Michael, what did Joyce tell you?" "Nothing. She didn't." He stopped, realizing his mistake. "She wrote in her planner that she needed to talk to Em about everything." "That was you, wasn't it? She came to you for help, and you, what? Told Ingrid? Warned her that Joyce was going to expose the fraud?" "You don't understand." Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "Ingrid said it was just financial irregularities. She said if it came out, I'd lose my job, our house, everything. She said we had to protect ourselves." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Joyce came to you, her own brother, and you chose your wife over her. "I chose my family." His anguish was real, devastating. "I have 2 kids, Mom. 2 children who need stability, who need their father to provide for them. Ingrid said if I stayed quiet, if I convinced Joyce to drop it, everything would be fine. But Joyce didn't drop it." Michael's silence was confirmation. "What did Ingrid do, Michael?" I stepped closer, my voice shaking. "What did your wife do to my daughter?" "I don't know. I swear I don't know." Tears streamed down his face. "Joyce stopped returning my calls. Then a week later, she was dead. Ingrid said it was just a coincidence, that her heart condition—" "She didn't have a heart condition!" I was shouting now, all pretense of calm shattered. "Someone murdered her, and your wife is connected to it." "No." He shook his head violently. "No, Ingrid wouldn't. She couldn't." But his voice lacked conviction. He was trying to convince himself more than me. My phone rang. "Mr. Brennan." I answered, still staring at my son. "Mrs. Hollister, don't react to what I'm about to tell you," Mr. Brennan said urgently. "Just listen. I have a contact at the police department. Ingrid Meekwas seen entering Joyce's apartment building the night of her death. Security footage shows her arriving at 9:47 p.m. and leaving at 10:23. 9 minutes before Joyce called 911. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Michael," I said quietly, "where was Ingrid the night Joyce died?" His face went white. "She had a client dinner. She didn't get home until after midnight." "What client?" I don't remember. She has so many—" "What client, Michael?" "I don't know." He was breaking apart in front of me. "She said it ran late, that she'd tell me about it later, but she never did. And I never asked because he hadn't wanted to know. Because on some level, perhaps unconsciously, he'd suspected." "Your wife was at Joyce's apartment that night," I said. "She was there when Joyce died." Michael's legs seemed to give out. He sat down hard, his head in his hands. "No. Please, no." The front door opened behind me. Ingrid stood in the doorway, still in her business suit, her expression utterly calm. "I thought I might find you here," she said, looking at Michael. "You really should have let me handle this, darling. You're too emotional about family matters." She pulled the door closed behind her and smiled at me. It was the coldest smile I'd ever seen. Aretha, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about your daughter and about what's going to happen next. Ingrid moved into my kitchen with the ease of someone who felt entirely in control. She set her briefcase on the counter, removed her coat, and draped it carefully over a chair. Every movement was precise, unhurried. She wasn't afraid of being caught or confronted. She was confident. That frightened me more than anger would have. "Michael, darling, would you make us some tea?" she asked, as if this were a normal family visit. "I think we could all use something calming." "Ingrid," Michael's voice broke. "Mom says you were at Joyce's apartment that night." "Of course I was." She pulled out a chair and sat down, crossing her legs elegantly. "Joyce called me. She was having a panic attack about the whole Kellner situation. She wanted advice on how to handle it. The lie was delivered so smoothly, so believably, that for a moment I almost questioned what I knew. "You're lying," I said. "Joyce was meeting with the FDA. She was building a case against your client." Ingrid's smile didn't waver. "Is that what that charming retired detective told you? Or was it the federal agent in the parking lot?" "Yes, Aretha. I know about your little meetings. I know about everything you've been doing." My blood ran cold. "You've been following me. I've been protecting my family. There's a difference." She glanced at Michael, who stood frozen by the stove. When Michael told me his mother was making inquiries about Joyce's death, I knew I needed to understand what was happening. "So yes, I hired someone to keep track of your movements, for your own safety, of course." "Of course," I echoed, the words bitter in my mouth. "Joyce was troubled, Aretha. Surely you knew that. She was paranoid, seeing conspiracies everywhere. The stress of her job had become overwhelming." Ingrid's tone was sympathetic, practiced. "That night, she called me in hysterics. She thought people were following her, that her apartment was bugged. Classic signs of a mental breakdown." "Stop it," Michael whispered. "Just stop lying." Ingrid's expression hardened for just a moment before smoothing back into concerned compassion. "I'm not lying, darling. I went to Joyce's apartment to help her. I brought wine, hoping it would calm her nerves. We talked for about an hour. She seemed better when I left, more rational. I had no idea she would—" "She didn't have a breakdown," I interrupted. "She was murdered." "Murdered?" Ingrid laughed, a light tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "With what?" "There were no wounds, no signs of struggle, no toxicology findings. The medical examiner was very thorough. Medical examiners can be fooled, or bought." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ingrid stood slowly, her composure slipping just enough for me to see the calculation behind her eyes. "That's a very serious accusation, Aretha. Suggesting corruption, conspiracy. People who make such claims without evidence often find themselves facing legal consequences. Defamation, for instance. Or harassment charges. Is that a threat? It's a warning. From someone who cares about this family's reputation and future." She picked up her briefcase and opened it, pulling out a folder. "I came here tonight to give you this. Consider it an olive branch." She slid the folder across the table. Inside were legal documents. I scanned them quickly, my horror growing with each page. "A competency hearing?" I looked up at her in disbelief. "You're trying to have me declared mentally incompetent?" "Not trying, Aretha. Preparing. Just in case your grief-induced conspiracy theories escalate to the point where you become a danger to yourself or others." Ingrid's voice was syrupy sweet. "Michael and I have been documenting concerning behaviors. The sudden decision to work at a dry cleaner's. Your obsessive focus on Joyce's death. Your refusal to accept medical facts. Your paranoid accusations against family members." Michael was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. "Ingrid, what is this? We discussed protecting our family, Michael, our children. Your mother is clearly suffering from some form of dementia or delusional disorder. She needs help, not encouragement to pursue fantasies about murder and corruption." "I'm not delusional," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And you know it. This is about control. If you can have me declared incompetent, you can shut down the autopsy request, stop the investigation, make all of this go away. Or," Ingrid said calmly, It's about getting you the psychiatric care you desperately need before you destroy what's left of this family. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Brennan. Police on their way. Stall. Help was coming. But I needed to keep Ingrid talking. Needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. How much did they pay you? I asked. Kellner or Meek Financial? How much was my daughter's life worth? You're not listening. Ingrid's patience was wearing thin. Joyce died of natural causes. I was there as her friend, trying to help her through a crisis, nothing more. Then why did you wipe down the wine glasses? The question hung in the air. Ingrid's face went very still. Who told you about the wine glasses? Her voice had lost its warmth entirely. Does it matter? You cleaned them before you left. Why would you do that if you had nothing to hide? I was being respectful of Joyce's privacy. She'd been drinking heavily, and I didn't want investigators to think poorly of her. Or you didn't want your fingerprints found at a death scene. Ingrid's hand moved to her briefcase. For one terrible moment, I thought she might pull out a weapon. Instead, she withdrew another document. This is a restraining order, she said quietly. Filed this afternoon. It prohibits you from contacting Michael, me, or our children until after a psychological evaluation. It also prevents you from interfering with Joyce's final arrangements. You can't do that. I already have. A judge signed it 2 hours ago based on Michael's testimony about your erratic behavior and threatening statements. I looked at my son. Michael, you signed this? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Ingrid said it was temporary, just until you got help. I didn't know about the competency hearing, I swear. You weak, spineless? I bit off the words. Anger wouldn't help. I needed to think clearly. Ingrid checked her watch. I'll give you 10 minutes to pack a bag. You can't stay in this house tonight. The restraining order requires you to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from Michael at all times. This is my house. And Michael is here. So legally, you need to leave. I've arranged a room for you at the Fairview Hotel. You'll stay there while we sort out the psychiatric evaluation. The trap was perfect. If I refused to leave, I'd be violating a court order, which would support her competency claims. If I complied, I'd be separated from my home, my resources, my base of operation. What did you give her? I asked suddenly. That night, in her apartment. What was in the wine? Ingrid's smile returned, colder than before. I have no idea what you're talking about. Joyce was healthy. The only way to make her death look natural would be something that mimics heart failure, something that metabolizes quickly, leaves minimal traces. I was thinking out loud, remembering fragments from mystery novels, TV shows. Potassium chloride? Or something more sophisticated? You've been watching too many crime dramas, Aretha. Or you've been reading too many pharmaceutical journals. You'd have access through Meek Financial. Access to research, to experimental compounds, to things that aren't even on standard toxicology screens. Ingrid's composure finally cracked. Enough. Michael, get your mother's suitcase. She needs to leave now. But Michael didn't move. He was staring at Ingrid with dawning horror. The night Joyce died, you came home late. You said you'd had wine at your client dinner. You showered immediately, changed clothes. You put everything in the dry cleaning bag, even your shoes. I always do that after client dinners. No, Michael said slowly. You don't. You usually just hang up your suit. But that night you scrubbed yourself in the shower for almost 30 minutes. I heard the water running. I thought you were just stressed from work, but nothing. Ingrid's voice had steel in it now. You're letting your mother's delusions infect you. You wouldn't let me near the dry cleaning bag. You took it yourself the next morning. First thing. You never do that. I always drop off the dry cleaning. Ingrid grabbed her coat. I'm not going to stand here and defend myself against baseless accusations. Aretha, you have 10 minutes. After that, I'm calling the police to enforce the restraining order. Call them, I said. I'd love to explain to the police why you're so eager to have me removed from my own home. Fine. She pulled out her phone. Wait. Michael stepped between us. Ingrid, just wait. Mom's right. We should hear what the police have to say. About the security footage. About you being at Joyce's apartment. Ingrid's eyes went flat and cold. Michael, move. No. His voice shook, but he held his ground. I've been letting you make all the decisions. Tell me what to think, what to do. But this is my sister we're talking about. My sister who died 3 months ago. And I didn't even question it because you told me not to. I told you there was nothing to question. You told me a lot of things. Michael's voice grew stronger. You told me Joyce was paranoid, that she was making wild accusations, that if I listened to her, I'd lose my job, my reputation. You made me choose between my wife and my sister, and I chose you. But what if I chose wrong? You didn't choose wrong. Ingrid's tone turned pleading. Sweetheart, listen to yourself. Your mother is manipulating you, turning you against me. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Then prove it, I said. Tell us exactly what happened that night. Every detail. If you have nothing to hide, Ingrid, tell us the truth. She looked between Michael and me, calculating. I could see her mind working, weighing options, considering outcomes. Fine, she said finally. You want the truth? Here it is. Joyce was blackmailing me. The admission stunned us both into silence. She discovered some financial irregularities at Kellner through her sales access. Nothing major, just some creative accounting to improve quarterly reports. She came to me, her brother's wife, someone she trusted, and asked for advice. I explained that these were common practices, that she was overreacting. Ingrid sat back down, her expression earnest. But Joyce wouldn't let it go. She threatened to report everything to the FDA, which would have destroyed Kellner, Meek Financial, and Michael's career by association. So I offered her money to reconsider. That's where the $47,000 came from. You paid her to stay quiet, I said. I paid her to think carefully before ruining innocent people's lives. But she took the money and planned to report everything anyway. I found out through a contact at Kellner that she'd been meeting with federal investigators. So yes, I went to her apartment that night to confront her. And then what happened? Ingrid's eyes glistened with what looked like genuine tears. We argued. She said the money was proof of guilt, that she was going to turn it over to the FDA along with everything else. She was so self-righteous, so convinced she was doing the right thing. She didn't care that she was destroying families, ending careers, ruining lives. So you killed her, Michael whispered. No. Ingrid shook her head violently. No, I left. Angry? Yes. Upset? Absolutely. But I left her alive. 30 minutes later, I got a call from my contact at Kellner saying Joyce had called 911. By the time I found out she'd died, it was too late to... She stopped abruptly. Too late to what? I demanded. Too late to cover your tracks? Too late to retrieve the money? Too late to stop the investigation? Too late to say I was sorry. Ingrid's voice rose. Too late to tell her I didn't mean the things I said. We argued, Aretha. I said terrible things about her being naive and destructive. I told her she was throwing away her future for nothing. And then I left, and she died, and I'll have to live with those being my last words to her forever. It was a masterful performance. The tears, the anguish, the regret. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her, but I'd seen the wine glasses. I'd heard about the missing $47,000. I knew about the security footage showing Ingrid leaving 9 minutes before the 911 call. And I knew that someone who could lie this convincingly could kill just as easily. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Ingrid heard them too. She stood quickly, gathering her belongings. Those are for a domestic disturbance call I made 20 minutes ago, she said. When I arrived and heard Aretha making threatening statements. Michael will corroborate my account. Won't you, darling? Michael looked between us, paralyzed. Choose carefully, Ingrid warned. Choose your wife and children and future, or choose the fantasy your mother is selling. But understand that you can't have both. The police cars pulled up outside, red and blue lights flashing through the windows. Ingrid moved to the door, her hand on the knob. Oh, and Aretha? She turned back with that cold smile. I'd think very carefully before making any accusations you can't prove. Because I have an entire law firm on retainer, and I will bury you in litigation so deep you'll never see daylight again. You'll lose this house, your savings, your freedom. And all for what? A daughter who made her choices and paid the price? She opened the door as the police knocked. Officers, thank goodness you're here. My mother-in-law has been making disturbing threats. I'm very concerned for her mental state. I watched Ingrid transform before my eyes into a worried, frightened woman seeking help. The officers looked past her at me, assessing, judging, and I realized that I wasn't just fighting for justice for Joyce anymore. I was fighting for my own survival. I raised my hands in a gesture of calm as the two officers entered my kitchen. Both were young, probably in their late 20s, with the cautious expressions of people trained to expect the worst. "Officers," I said clearly, "I'm Aretha Hollister. This is my home. I'm 65 years old and I'm being threatened by my daughter-in-law because I'm investigating my daughter's suspicious death." Ingrid made a sound of distress. "You see? She's been like this for days, making wild accusations, refusing to accept that Joyce died of natural causes. We're worried she's having some kind of breakdown." The taller officer, whose badge read Martinez, pulled out a notepad. "Ma'am, we received a call about a domestic disturbance. Someone making threats?" "I haven't threatened anyone," I said. "I've been asking questions about my daughter's death, questions that certain people find inconvenient." "She claims I murdered Joyce," Ingrid said, her voice breaking perfectly. "Her own granddaughter's mother. It's heartbreaking to watch her deteriorate like this." "I don't have grandchildren," I corrected quietly. "Joyce never married, and I'm not deteriorating. I'm investigating." Officer Martinez looked between us. "Is there anyone else here who can verify what happened?" "My son, Michael." I gestured to where he stood, still frozen by the stove, though I'm not sure whose side he'll take. Michael's face was ashen. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally spoke. "I don't know what happened. My wife says one thing, my mother says another. I don't know anymore." The second officer, younger with the name Foster on his badge, walked through the kitchen, glancing around. "Any weapons in the house? Anything we should be aware of?" "No weapons," I said. "Just documents. Evidence that my daughter-in-law was at my daughter's apartment the night she died. Evidence that she had motive to silence Joyce." "Documents can be fabricated," Ingrid interjected smoothly, "especially by someone who's convinced herself of a conspiracy that doesn't exist." Officer Martinez turned to her. "Ma'am, were you at the deceased's apartment the night of her death?" Ingrid didn't hesitate. "Yes. Joyce called me in distress. I went to help her. I've already explained this to the family." "And you left before she died?" "Of course I did. She was alive and calmer when I left. What happened afterward was a tragic medical event." I could see Martinez considering this, weighing the composed, professional woman against the older widow making accusations. I knew how this looked. I'd known from the moment the police arrived that Ingrid had chosen this confrontation carefully. But so had I. "Officer Martinez," I said calmly, "I'd like to show you something. May I get my phone?" He nodded cautiously. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. "This conversation has been recorded since the moment my daughter-in-law arrived. This state is a one-party consent state. I don't need her permission to record in my own home." Ingrid's face went pale. I played back her voice. "Joyce was blackmailing me. I offered her money to reconsider. I went to her apartment that night to confront her." "That's taken out of context," Ingrid snapped, her composure finally cracking. "I was explaining the situation, not confessing to murder." "You confessed to paying Joyce $47,000 in hush money," I said. "You admitted to being at her apartment the night she died. You confirmed you had motive to keep her quiet." I turned to the officers. "That recording, combined with security footage showing when she arrived and left, contradicts the official timeline." "This is entrapment," Ingrid hissed. "You manipulated me into telling the truth?" I cut her off. "Officers, I also have documentation of a restraining order filed against me this afternoon. Filed by a woman who's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so she can stop an independent autopsy of my daughter's body." Officer Foster pulled out his radio. "Martinez, I think we need a detective here." "Already on his way," said a voice from the doorway. Mr. Brennan entered, followed by Daniel Wright. Both men showed their credentials to the officers. Daniel's federal badge carried weight that changed the entire atmosphere of the room. "Aretha Hollister has been cooperating with a federal investigation," Daniel said formally. "Her daughter Joyce was a confidential informant in an FDA case involving pharmaceutical fraud. We have reason to believe Joyce's death was connected to that investigation. Ingrid's lawyer instincts kicked in. I'm not saying another word without my attorney present. That's your right, Daniel said. But I should inform you that we've already obtained a warrant for your phone records, financial transactions, and travel history. We've also subpoenaed records from Meek Financial regarding your company's relationship with Kellner Pharmaceuticals. You can't do this, Ingrid breathed. You have no evidence of any crime. Actually, Mr. Brennan said, pulling out a folder, we have quite a bit. Security footage from Joyce's building showing you arrived at 9:47 p.m. and left at 10:23 p.m. Witness statements from neighbors who heard arguing. And this. He pulled out a photograph of a dry cleaning receipt. Morrison's Dry Cleaning. You brought in an entire outfit the morning after Joyce died. Suit, blouse, shoes. You paid extra for rush service and asked specifically that no items be returned if stains couldn't be completely removed. Ingrid's face had gone from pale to gray. So what? I spilled wine. That's not a crime. The dry cleaner kept the blouse. I said quietly. The stains wouldn't come out. Ted, my manager, keeps items like that for 6 months in case customers want to try to retrieve them anyway. I asked him to check the storage room this afternoon. Mr. Brennan pulled out another photo. A cream-colored blouse with dark stains on the sleeve and collar. Those stains tested positive for blood. Joyce's blood type. We're running DNA comparison now. The room went absolutely silent. Joyce had a nosebleed, Ingrid said, but her voice had lost its conviction. She got anxious during our argument. Her nose started bleeding. I tried to help her, got some blood on my sleeve, that's all. The medical examiner's report mentions no nosebleed, Daniel said. No nasal trauma at all. So either the report is incomplete or you're lying. Michael made a sound like a wounded animal. Ingrid, please, just tell them the truth. I am telling the truth. But she was backing toward the door now, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. You're all conspiring against me. Aretha's manipulated all of you with her crazy theories. The blouse also had trace amounts of a chemical compound, Mr. Brennan continued relentlessly. Something the crime lab couldn't immediately identify. But when we sent it to the FDA's forensic department, they recognized it. A cardiac stimulant used in experimental drug trials. Highly concentrated, it can cause heart failure that mimics natural death. Daniel stepped forward. Kellner Pharmaceuticals was running trials on that exact compound 6 months ago. The trial was terminated due to safety concerns, but samples remained in their research facility. A facility that your company, Meek Financial, had access to for audit purposes. Ingrid's back hit the door. This is circumstantial. You can't prove I took anything from Kellner. Actually, we can. Daniel pulled out his phone, showing security footage. This is from Kellner's research facility, dated 3 weeks before Joyce's death. That's you, Ingrid Meek, entering the restricted lab area at 7:35 p.m. You were there for 12 minutes. When you left, you carried nothing visible. But the inventory records showed 2 vials of the experimental cardiac stimulant went missing that same evening. I was doing an audit. You signed in as an IT contractor, Daniel interrupted, using a false name and credentials. We verified that with Kellner's security department this afternoon. Ingrid's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. You can't use any of this. It's an illegal search, obtained without proper warrants. We had warrants for everything, Daniel said. Signed by a federal judge this morning. This investigation has been ongoing for 3 months, Ingrid. We just needed enough evidence to move forward. I watched my daughter-in-law's face cycle through emotions. Fear, rage, calculation, desperation. Finally, she looked at Michael. Sweetheart, you have to believe me. I did this for us. For our family. Joyce was going to destroy everything we'd built. Our home, our future, our children's security. I couldn't let that happen. Michael stared at her like she was a stranger. You killed my sister. I saved our family. Ingrid's voice rose, becoming shrill. Joyce was selfish, reckless. She was willing to ruin hundreds of lives for some abstract idea of justice. Someone had to stop her. So you murdered her, I said, my voice breaking. You went to her apartment, shared wine with her, put that chemical in her glass, and watched her die. I didn't watch. The words burst from Ingrid like a confession she couldn't hold back anymore. I left before. I couldn't stay. I gave her the wine and made an excuse to leave. I told myself maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe she'd be fine. But I knew. I knew what would happen within 30 minutes. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out. Even the police officers stood frozen, processing what they'd just heard. Ingrid seemed to realize what she'd admitted. Her face crumpled. I didn't want to. You have to understand. I tried everything else first. I offered her money, threatened her job, begged her to reconsider. But she wouldn't listen. She was going to destroy everything. So you destroyed her instead, Michael said. His voice was hollow, empty of everything except grief. Daniel moved forward, pulling out handcuffs. Ingrid Meek, you're under arrest for the murder of Joyce Hollister. You have the right to remain silent. Ingrid lunged toward the door, but Officer Martinez caught her arm. She struggled briefly, then went limp, sobbing. As they handcuffed her, she looked at me one last time. You should have let her be cremated. You should have let this go. We could have all moved on. Moved on? I stepped closer, looking her in the eyes. My daughter is dead. Murdered by someone she trusted, someone she called family. There is no moving on from that. There's only justice. They led Ingrid out to the police car. The red and blue lights painted the walls of my kitchen in alternating colors. Neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, watching the spectacle. Michael sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I helped her. When Joyce came to me, told me she was scared, asked for my advice, I told Ingrid everything. I gave her the ammunition to— You didn't know, I said, though the words felt inadequate. You thought you were protecting your family. I chose wrong. He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. I chose the wrong person, and Joyce died because of it. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but some truths are too heavy for easy absolution. Michael would have to live with his choices, just as I would have to live with mine. Daniel approached, closing his notebook. We'll need your full statement, Mrs. Hollister, and that recording. It'll be key evidence in the prosecution. Will it be enough to convict her? Combined with the forensic evidence, the security footage, and her confession? Yes, Ingrid Meek will spend the rest of her life in prison. Mr. Brennan put a hand on my shoulder. You did it. You got justice for Joyce. But standing in my kitchen, surrounded by the aftermath of destruction, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss upon loss, truth purchased at the cost of family, justice that came too late to save anyone. Joyce was still gone. Michael's marriage was destroyed. His children would grow up knowing their mother was a murderer. And I was still a mother who'd buried her daughter. Aretha? Mr. Brennan's voice was gentle. Are you all right? I looked around my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd made breakfast for my children for 40 years. Where Robert and I had shared morning coffee. Where Joyce had sat doing homework at this very table. No, I said honestly. But I will be. Because the truth, however painful, was still the truth. And Joyce deserved nothing less. 3 weeks after Ingrid's arrest, I returned to Morrison's dry cleaning for my final shift. Ted had insisted I didn't need to work anymore, that I'd been through enough. But I wanted to finish what I'd started, to close this chapter properly before moving forward. The bell above the door chimed as Mr. Brennan entered, right on schedule. Tuesday, 10:15. Some routines had become sacred. Mrs. Hollister. He smiled, setting down a garment bag. I brought you something. Inside was Joyce's blue cardigan, the one I'd packed away in the box. He'd had it cleaned and pressed, restored to the way it looked when she wore it. I thought you might want to have it properly cared for, he said gently. Something to keep, to remember her by. I ran my fingers over the soft fabric, feeling tears prick my eyes. Thank you, Lawrence. For everything. You did the hard work. I just helped you find the path. He paused. Have you heard the latest about the case? I had. Daniel Wright had called me that morning with updates. The investigation into Kellner Pharmaceuticals had expanded dramatically. Ingrid's arrest had opened floodgates. Other employees coming forward, documents surfacing, a pattern of fraud that stretched back years. The CEO and CFO were facing federal charges. Meek Financial was under investigation for money laundering and securities fraud. Joyce's evidence is being used, I said. All those files she collected, all the risks she took. They're finally making a difference. She'd be proud of you. For not letting her sacrifice be forgotten. I wasn't so sure about that. Proud seemed too simple a word for the complex tangle of emotions I imagined Joyce might have felt. Relief, perhaps. Vindication. Grief at the cost paid by those she loved. The bell chimed again. Michael entered, looking thinner than he had 3 weeks ago. Older. He'd aged years in the span of days. The weight of guilt and loss etched into every line of his face. "Mom," he said quietly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." I gestured to the back room. "We can talk privately." Mr. Brennan excused himself tactfully, promising to return later. Michael and I sat in the chemical-scented space where this all began, where Lawrence Brennan first whispered the truth about Joyce's death. "The kids want to see you," Michael said. "They've been asking why Grandma doesn't come over anymore." I'd been staying away, giving Michael space to explain things to his children in whatever way he felt appropriate. They were 9 and 7, old enough to know something terrible had happened, too young to understand the full scope of betrayal. "What have you told them?" "The truth, mostly. That their mother did something very wrong. That she hurt someone we loved, and now she has to face consequences." His voice cracked. "They cry a lot? They don't understand why Mommy can't come home. How are you managing?" "I'm not." He laughed bitterly. "I wake up every morning and remember all over again. Joyce is dead. My wife murdered her. I helped make it happen by being blind and weak and selfish. Michael? No, Mom. Don't try to make me feel better. I don't deserve it." He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Joyce came to me. She trusted me. And I betrayed her because Ingrid convinced me that protecting our lifestyle was more important than protecting my sister." The pain in his voice was raw, genuine. But I'd learned in these past weeks that pain alone wasn't enough. Awareness without action was just another form of denial. "What are you going to do about it?" I asked. He blinked, surprised by the question. "What can I do? Joyce is gone. I can't fix that." "No, you can't. But you can choose how you live with it. You can let the guilt consume you, or you can use it to become someone your children can be proud of." "How? How do I do that?" I thought about my own journey these past months, the grief that had driven me to a dry cleaning counter, the questions I'd been afraid to ask, the moment I'd chosen to pursue truth even when it meant tearing apart what remained of my family. "You start by being honest," I said, "with yourself, with your children, with the world. Ingrid convinced you to prioritize money and status over integrity. Don't make that mistake again." "I've already started." He pulled out some papers from his jacket. "I contacted the FDA, told them everything I knew about Ingrid's dealings with Kellner, even the things that might implicate me. I also resigned from my position at the investment firm. The connections there were all through Ingrid, and I don't want any part of that world anymore." I felt a glimmer of hope. "What will you do instead?" "I don't know yet. Something honest. Something I can explain to my kids without feeling ashamed." He managed a weak smile. "Maybe I'll go back to school, finish that teaching degree I abandoned when Ingrid said teachers don't make enough money. Joyce would have liked that. Joyce would have called me an idiot for taking this long to figure it out." His smile faded. "I miss her, Mom. I miss my sister. And I hate that I wasted so much of the time we had left." "I know." I reached across and squeezed his hand. "I miss her too." We sat in silence for a moment, sharing grief that would never fully heal but might, eventually, transform into something bearable. "The kids really do want to see you," Michael said finally. "Would you come to dinner? Nothing fancy. Just us, trying to figure out how to be a family again." "I'd like that." He left with a promise to call later with details. I returned to the front counter where Ted was processing a complicated stain removal. He looked up when I approached. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Getting there." I pulled off my Morrison's dry cleaning apron for the last time. "Ted, thank you for giving me this job, for not asking too many questions, for keeping that blouse in storage. I had a feeling it was important." He folded the apron carefully. "You know, Aretha, you're welcome to stay. You're good at this work, and the customers like you." I appreciate that, but it's time for me to go home. Home. I'd been avoiding it. The house that held too many memories, too many ghosts. But avoiding pain didn't make it disappear. It just postponed the inevitable reckoning. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with Joyce's laptop finally open in front of me. Michael had returned it after the police finished with the forensic analysis. I'd been afraid to look at it, afraid of what I might find or not find. The password had been my birthday, a simple gesture that made my heart ache. Inside were folders of documents, the evidence Joyce had collected for the FDA, spreadsheets showing falsified clinical trial data, emails discussing how to hide adverse reactions, photographs of altered lab reports. My daughter had been meticulous, thorough, brave, but there was also a personal folder labeled simply Mom. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, dated 2 days before her death. Dear Mom, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I've set this letter to auto-send to your email if I don't log in for more than 2 weeks, but I'm hoping you'll never see it. I need you to know that I'm doing something important, something dangerous, but necessary. There are people at my company who have been lying about drug safety. People have died because of falsified data. More will die if this continues. I've been working with the FDA to expose the fraud, but I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared because I think someone knows what I'm doing. I think they're watching me. I've tried to be careful, but powerful people don't appreciate whistleblowers. I told Michael about this, hoping he could help me, but he's been distant lately, and I think Ingrid is influencing him. I love my brother, but I don't trust his judgment anymore. If something happens to me, please don't let them say it was natural causes. Please ask questions. Please fight for the truth, even if it's painful. You taught me that integrity matters more than comfort. That doing what's right is worth the cost. I'm trying to live by those values, Mom. I hope that makes you proud. I love you. I'm sorry for any pain this causes you, but I couldn't stay silent. Your daughter, Joyce. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Joyce had known. She'd known she was in danger and had still chosen to move forward. She'd trusted me to finish what she started, to fight when she couldn't. And I had. Despite my age, my grief, my fears, I had fought. The doorbell rang. I wiped my eyes and found Daniel Wright on my doorstep, carrying a folder. Mrs. Hollister, I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all. Please come in. He settled at the kitchen table, the same table where Ingrid had threatened me, where Michael had broken down, where so much had unraveled and been rebuilt. I wanted to give you an update personally, Daniel said. The grand jury returned indictments this afternoon. Ingrid is being charged with first-degree murder, theft of controlled substances, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Based on the evidence and her confession, the prosecutor is confident of a conviction. How long? Life without parole, most likely. Pennsylvania doesn't have the death penalty, but she'll never be free again. I thought I'd feel satisfaction at this news. Instead, I just felt tired. And Kellner? 14 executives indicted. The company itself is facing criminal charges and will likely be dissolved. The victims' families are filing civil suits. It's going to be a long process, but justice is moving forward. Because of Joyce. Because of Joyce. And because of you. Daniel leaned forward. You could have accepted the easy answer. Natural causes, quick cremation, move on with your life. Instead, you asked questions no one wanted to answer. You challenged powerful people. You risked your own safety and sanity to uncover the truth. I'm her mother. What else could I do? Most people would have done exactly what everyone wanted. Grieve quietly and let it go. But you didn't. You proved that age and wisdom can be more powerful than money, connections, or violence. After Daniel left, I walked through my house room by room. This place had witnessed 40 years of family life. Robert and I buying it as newlyweds, barely able to afford the mortgage, bringing baby Michael home, then Joyce 3 years later, birthday parties and holiday dinners and ordinary Tuesday evenings, the spare bedroom where I'd discovered Joyce's boxes, the kitchen where I'd confronted Ingrid, the living room where Robert and I had watched our children grow. This house held grief, yes, but also love, also strength, also the determination that had carried me through the darkest months of my life. I couldn't erase what had happened here, but I could choose what happened next. The next morning, I called a contractor. The kitchen needed updating, I told him. New counters, fresh paint, better lighting. Not to erase the memories, but to honor them by making the space alive again. I called Michael and invited him and the children to move in temporarily. You shouldn't be alone right now, I said. And neither should I. Let's figure out how to be a family together. I called Mr. Brennan and invited him to dinner. Nothing romantic, I clarified. Just friendship. And maybe you could tell me more about your granddaughter, the one Joyce taught. I called the Riverside Community Center and asked about volunteer opportunities. I'd like to continue my daughter's work, I explained. Teaching art to children who need it. Slowly, deliberately, I began building a life that honored Joyce's memory not through grief alone, but through action, through choosing integrity over comfort, through asking hard questions and refusing easy answers. 2 months after Ingrid's arrest, I attended Joyce's second funeral. The first had been a lie, a closed casket, a rush to cremation, a desperate attempt to bury the truth along with her body. This time, we did it right. The independent autopsy had confirmed everything. Traces of the experimental cardiac stimulant, evidence of poisoning designed to mimic heart failure, a murder disguised as natural death. We buried her in the family plot next to Robert. The headstone read, Joyce Marie Hollister, beloved daughter, devoted sister, courageous truth-teller. Her voice still speaks. Michael stood beside me, one arm around each of his children. They'd brought drawings they'd made for their aunt, colorful, childish tributes to a woman they'd barely known. We buried those too, tucked into the earth above her casket. Mr. Brennan attended, as did Daniel Wright. A handful of Joyce's friends from the community center. Some former colleagues from Kellner who'd found their own courage to speak up. The pastor spoke about integrity and sacrifice, about the cost of doing what's right and the legacy that outlives us all. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. My daughter died because she refused to be silent in the face of injustice. She died because powerful people valued profit over human life, and she threatened their bottom line. She died alone, betrayed by someone she trusted, in an apartment where she should have been safe. I paused, looking at the faces gathered around the grave. But she didn't die in vain. Because of Joyce's courage, hundreds of patients will be protected from dangerous drugs. Because of her evidence, criminals will face justice. Because of her sacrifice, others will find the strength to speak truth to power. I placed a hand on the casket. I'm 65 years old. I'm a widow, a grieving mother, someone most people would dismiss as powerless. But I learned something these past months. I learned that wisdom earned through decades of living is a kind of power, that patience and intelligence can defeat violence and deception, that an older woman asking quiet questions can bring down empires built on lies. I looked at Michael. I learned that family is tested not by comfort, but by crisis. That love means holding people accountable, not enabling their worst choices. That forgiveness is possible, but it requires honest reckoning with hard truths. I looked at the children. I learned that the best way to honor the dead is by living with the integrity they embodied, by teaching the next generation that some things matter more than money or status or safety. I stepped back from the grave. Joyce, my beloved daughter, you taught me all of this. You taught me that it's never too late to fight for what's right. That age is not weakness, but wisdom. That one voice speaking truth can change the world. The pastor said a final prayer. We each dropped a flower into the grave, white roses, Joyce's favorites. As we walked back to the cars, Michael fell into step beside me. She'd be proud of you, Mom, of what you did. She'd be proud of you too, for finally choosing the right side. It shouldn't have taken her death for me to find my courage. No, I agreed. But you found it. That's what matters now. 6 months later, I stood in my renovated kitchen, preparing dinner for a house full of people. Michael and the children had moved back into their own place, but they came over every Sunday. Mr. Brennan arrived early to help cook, a tradition we'd developed. Daniel Wright stopped by when his case schedule allowed. The kitchen looked different now. Bright white counters replaced the old worn laminate. Fresh sage green paint covered walls that had witnessed too much darkness. New windows let in floods of natural light, but Joyce's art still hung on the walls. The drawings she'd made as a child, the paintings from college, the photographs from her volunteer work. Her presence remained, transformed from grief into celebration. As I set the table, I thought about the journey from that first morning at Morrison's dry cleaning to this moment. The fear, the questions, the revelations, the betrayal and the courage, the loss and the finding. Ingrid was serving her sentence at the state prison, her appeals denied. The children visited occasionally, supervised visits that broke everyone's hearts. Michael was in his second semester of a teaching program, struggling with coursework but determined to finish. Kellner Pharmaceuticals had been dissolved, its assets seized to compensate victims. Meek Financial had settled multiple lawsuits and restructured under new leadership. The FDA had implemented new oversight protocols inspired by Joyce's case. The world had changed because my daughter refused to stay silent, and it had changed again because I refused to accept convenient lies. "Mom, can I help with anything?" Michael's younger son asked, appearing at my elbow with eager eyes. "You can put out the napkins," I said, handing him the stack. Nice and neat at each place. He set to work with serious concentration. Children, I'd learned, needed purpose as much as adults did. They needed to feel useful, to contribute, to be part of something larger than themselves, just like their grandmother had. As the house filled with voices and laughter, as dinner came together and family gathered around the table, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Peace. Not the absence of pain. That would never fully disappear, but the presence of meaning, purpose. The knowledge that I had honored my daughter's memory in the only way that mattered, by finishing what she started and refusing to let her sacrifice be forgotten. I was 65 years old, a widow, a mother, a grandmother, someone who'd worked at a dry cleaner's and taken down a corporate conspiracy, someone who'd proven that lived wisdom and quiet determination could overcome wealth, power, and violence, someone who'd lost everything and found herself in the process. The house that had once echoed with loss now resonated with life. The kitchen where Ingrid had threatened me now hosted Sunday dinners. The spare bedroom where I'd discovered Joyce's secrets now served as a playroom for grandchildren. Grief had transformed into legacy. Questions had become answers. An ending had become a beginning. As we sat down to eat, I raised my glass. To Joyce, for teaching us what courage looks like, for showing us that doing what's right matters more than doing what's easy, for reminding us that one person can make a difference, even when the cost is terrible. To Joyce, everyone echoed. I looked around the table at the faces I loved, flawed, complicated, striving to be better. This was family. Not perfect, not whole, but honest. Real. Moving forward. And somewhere, I believed, Joyce was watching. Proud not because we'd avenged her death, though we had, but because we'd learned the lesson she'd died teaching. That truth matters. That integrity cannot be purchased or intimidated. That the wisdom earned through living cannot be dismissed or destroyed. That an older woman with determination and intelligence is a force to be reckoned with. The evening light streamed through my new kitchen windows, golden and warm. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its rhythms. Children played in yards. Cars pulled into driveways. Lives continued in their ordinary, extraordinary ways. And inside my house, my home, a family gathered around the truth we'd fought so hard to uncover. It was enough. It would always be enough.